The gavel hadn't even struck yet, but the tension in the courtroom was suffocating. The air was thick with murmurs, reporters whispering, pens scratching against notepads. At the center of it all, Karoline Leavitt. Young, sharp, and unshaken. Then came the voice. Low, steady, laced with condescension. "Miss Leavitt, let me remind you. This is a courtroom, not a stage for political theatrics." Judge Howard Gates, a man feared in legal circles, known for crushing attorneys with a single sentence. Today, he had her in his sights. A few chuckles echoed from the defense table. Karoline didn't blink. She wasn't here for their approval. The case in front of her was explosive, millions stolen, a trail of fraud leading straight to powerful names. But as she prepared to lay it all out, she noticed something. Gates wasn't just dismissive. He was nervous, and he had every reason to be. Minutes later, the courtroom doors would burst open, and for the first time in his career, Judge Howard Gates would find himself on the wrong side of the law. Karoline steps into the courtroom, her expression unreadable, her posture firm. The air inside is thick with whispers and the faint sound of shuffling papers. All eyes follow her as she walks to the plaintiff's table, placing a thick folder of documents in front of her. Across from her, Charles Lawson sits with his attorney, legs crossed, his fingers tapping lazily on the desk. He doesn't look worried. If anything, he seems amused. At the bench, Judge Howard Gates leans back in his chair, studying Karoline with a smirk. His reputation precedes him, sharp, impatient, and known for making cases like these disappear. "Miss Leavitt," he says, his voice dripping with condescension. "You do know this is a courtroom, not a campaign stage?" A few chuckles rise from the defense side. Karoline doesn't react. She simply flips open her folder, her fingers brushing over the first page. Gates sighs dramatically, shaking his head. "I hope you're not here to waste my time." She meets his gaze without hesitation. "Not at all, Your Honor. I'm here to ensure the truth is heard." The defense attorney leans toward Lawson, whispering something, his grin widening. Gates taps his gavel lightly. "Then let's make this quick." Karoline tightens her grip on the file. She knows this won't be easy, but she didn't come here to be dismissed. Karoline flips open the first document, her movements steady, her expression unreadable. The room is still, except for the occasional scratch of a pen from the reporters in the back. She lifts a sheet of paper, holding it up for the court to see. This is a financial statement from Lawson Enterprises. It details a $4.5 million transfer, public funds, redirected to an unregistered account. The defense attorney barely glances at it before chuckling. "Miss Leavitt, do you even understand how corporate finance works?" he says, shaking his head. Judge Gates leans forward, eyes half-lidded as if already bored. "Is this going anywhere, Miss Leavitt?" She stays firm, unfazed by their tone. "This money was meant for infrastructure. Instead, it vanished into a shell company with no employees, no contracts, and no operations." Gates exhales sharply, drumming his fingers on the bench. "Financial errors happen. That doesn't prove fraud." Karoline turns another page, revealing a contract. "This document," she says, sliding it toward the judge, "is a signed agreement between Lawson Enterprises and a non-existent construction firm. The listed cost $2 million, but the payment made $4.5 million. The defense attorney scoffs. "Miss Leavitt, businesses make adjustments. Maybe they needed additional work." Karoline doesn't blink. Would that explain why the supposed contractor has no listed employees, no tax records, and no prior work history? The murmurs in the courtroom grow louder. A juror in the front row shifts in her seat, exchanging a glance with another. Judge Gates taps his gavel lightly. "You are making serious accusations, Miss Leavitt. Be very careful." She doesn't hesitate. "I am being careful, Your Honor. That's why I came prepared." She pulls out a final sheet, this one marked with red ink. "This," she says, "is a record of where the money actually went. The recipient, a private offshore account linked directly to Charles Lawson himself. The courtroom falls silent. For the first time, the defense attorney's grin falters. Lawson shifts in his chair, his hands gripping the table a little too tightly. Judge Gates leans back, rubbing his chin. His casual arrogance is gone, replaced by something else, calculation. Karoline watches him carefully. She knows he's not just skeptical. He's stalling. Then, just as he opens his mouth to speak, her phone vibrates in her coat pocket. A quick glance. A message from an investigative reporter she trusts. Judge Gates approved these transactions himself. Check the signature. Karoline's breath steadies. She slides the document back toward her and turns to the next page. If Gates thought this was over, he was very, very wrong. Karoline turns to the next document, but before she can speak, Judge Gates raises a hand. His tone is sharper now. Enough, Miss Leavitt. This court does not entertain baseless theories. If you have anything meaningful, present it. Otherwise, we are done here. His voice is calm, but there's something forced about it. The way his fingers tap against the bench. The way he avoids looking directly at the evidence in front of him. Karoline doesn't react. She slides another document forward. This is a contract signed between Lawson Enterprises and the city's planning commission. The project was budgeted at $2 million, yet $5 million was transferred. That's not a clerical error. That's theft. The defense attorney smirks, adjusting his tie. Miss Leavitt, do you realize how many contracts cross this court? Overpayments, cost adjustments. These things happen all the time. Judge Gates nods in agreement, his voice steady but dismissive. She's reaching, he says. I see no direct proof of wrongdoing here. Only assumptions. Karoline tightens her grip on the papers. Then perhaps you'll allow an independent audit? If it's just an error, the numbers will clear up. The courtroom shifts. A low murmur spreads among the jury. The female juror in the front row narrows her eyes, sensing something off. But Gates shakes his head before she even finishes. Denied. We don't pause trials for wild goose chases. The defense attorney leans back, looking satisfied. Karoline doesn't move. Her heartbeat stays steady. Then her phone vibrates. A single buzz. She glances down. A message flashes across the screen. Judge Gates approved these transfers himself. Check the signature. She exhales slowly, then lifts her head. Your Honor, I'd like to revisit the subcontract from earlier. Gates tilts his head slightly. What for? Karoline doesn't blink. Because the final approval signature on that document belongs to you. The courtroom goes completely still. A faint sound of rustling papers. A whisper from the jury. Even the reporters stop writing, their pens hovering over their notepads. Judge Gates stares at her, unmoving. Then he leans forward, his voice lowering. Miss Leavitt, I highly suggest you tread carefully. This is a courtroom, not a stage for conspiracy theories. Karoline stays firm. I agree, Your Honor. That's why I'm asking a simple question. Do you recognize this signature? She holds up the document, turning it toward him. The signature at the bottom stands out in bold ink. Gates doesn't look at it. I don't recall every document that crosses my desk, he says, his tone clipped. And even if I did sign it, that doesn't mean anything. Judges authorize plenty of financial agreements. It's part of the system. Karoline nods slowly. Then you won't mind if I submit it for further verification? His jaw tightens. The female juror leans forward, her hands clasped together. A man in the second row whispers something to his seatmate. The defense attorney shifts uncomfortably. Even Lawson, who has been relaxed this entire time, suddenly looks uneasy. Judge Gates exhales, then grips his gavel. Miss Leavitt, I will not allow this trial to be derailed by accusations without merit. I suggest you return to presenting relevant facts, or we will move forward without your claims. Karoline tilts her head slightly. I understand, Your Honor, but I must ask, are you refusing to verify your own signature? His fingers tighten around the gavel. His mouth opens, then closes. For the first time, Judge Gates looks unsure. Karoline doesn't break eye contact. And that's when she knows he's hiding something. Karoline doesn't move. Her grip tightens on the document, her pulse steady. The room feels heavier now, like everyone inside is waiting for something to break. She slides the paper forward. "Your Honor, this isn't just any signature. It's yours." A hush falls over the courtroom. The female juror in the front row leans forward, eyes narrowing. Reporters stop writing mid-sentence. Even Charles Lawson, who had been lounging in his seat moments ago, sits up straight. Judge Gates exhales sharply. He doesn't look down at the document. "Miss Leavitt, signatures alone don't prove wrongdoing. Judges authorize thousands of documents. Be very careful before making baseless accusations." His voice is firm, but something about it is off, too controlled, too rehearsed. Karoline doesn't react. Instead, she pulls out another sheet. "Then maybe you can explain this transaction." She lays it flat on the table, turning it toward the jury. "This is a wire transfer for $3 million. The destination? A private offshore account linked to a shell company. The name on the approval? Yours." Gates shifts in his seat. The tapping of his fingers on the bench has stopped. The defense attorney stands abruptly. "Objection, Your Honor. This is completely circumstantial. We have no verification that this so-called account even exists." Karoline doesn't flinch. "It does exist," she says, reaching for another document. "And it was flagged by financial regulators 6 months ago. The funds were moved in 2 separate transactions, both with your signature." Gasps ripple through the courtroom. A reporter in the back mutters, "Oh my God!" Judge Gates opens his mouth, but Karoline lifts a hand. "Before you respond, Your Honor, there's one more thing." She pulls out a folded sheet of paper and places it on the table. "This is a transcript of a recorded phone call. It's from 6 weeks ago, and it features your voice, discussing these same transactions with Mr. Lawson." Pin-drop silence follows. Gates' fingers curl around the edge of the bench. His jaw tightens, but he doesn't speak. The defense attorney clears his throat. "Your Honor, this is highly improper. If there's a recording, it should be reviewed before being presented in open court." Karoline folds her arms. "Of course, that's why the Justice Department already verified it." Judge Gates blinks. A bead of sweat forms on his temple. Lawson is pale now. His hands grip the table, his breathing shallow. Karoline tilts her head slightly. "Would you like to hear it?" Gates slams his gavel. "Enough!" His voice is louder than it should be, echoing across the silent courtroom. But it's too late. Everyone in the room sees what just happened. The judge, who was so confident moments ago, is unraveling. The female juror glances at her peers. One nods. A reporter leans to whisper to his colleague. "He's finished." Karoline slowly gathers the documents back into her folder. Judge Gates swallows hard, but his face is flushed now. He knows, and so does everyone else. The heavy silence lingers in the courtroom. Judge Gates grips the bench, his knuckles turning white. His usual confidence is gone. He opens his mouth, maybe to deny, maybe to demand. Boom! The main doors swing open, slamming against the walls. Every head turns. The air shifts. Pam Bondi steps inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her black suit crisp, her expression cold. 2 federal officers follow, their movements controlled, their presence undeniable. Gates stiffens. His breath catches for just a second, but Karoline catches it. He knows exactly why she's here. Bondi's voice cuts through the air like a blade. "Judge Howard Gates, under my authority as Attorney General, I am placing you under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and abuse of judicial power." Gasps ripple through the room. Reporters scramble, pens scratching, cameras flashing. The female juror in the front row clamps a hand over her mouth. A man 2 seats down mutters, "I knew something was off." Lawson freezes at the defense table, his eyes darting to his lawyer. But the man in the gray suit looks just as stunned. Gates stands abruptly, slamming his gavel so hard it nearly bounces from his grip. "This is outrageous," he bellows, his voice trembling. "You have no right to interrupt these proceedings." Bondi takes a step forward, unfazed. "Actually, I do. Her voice is steady, sharp. You have no authority here anymore. Gates swallows, his eyes flicking to the officers. I demand to see an arrest warrant. He snaps, voice cracking. Bondi doesn't blink. She reaches into her coat, pulls out a folded document, and drops it onto the bench in front of him. Signed this morning, she says flatly. Gates doesn't touch it. His hands curl into fists at his sides. The officers move in. One reaches for the cuffs. Gates jerks back. You're making a mistake, he hisses. I run this courtroom. This is my case. Bondi tilts her head. Not anymore. A click. The first cuff snaps around his wrist. The room erupts. Reporters shout over each other. The jury murmurs. The defense attorney pinches the bridge of his nose, realizing how deep they're in. Lawson shakes his head, his panic turning to something else. Desperation. I'll cooperate, he blurts suddenly, his voice breaking. I'll give you everything. Karoline turns to him, her eyes cool, unreadable. You had your chance. Bondi nods to the officers. Take him. Gates grits his teeth, his shoulders rising and falling with each uneven breath. But he doesn't fight. The second cuff locks. His career, his power, both over in an instant. The sharp click of the handcuffs echoes through the courtroom, cutting through the frantic murmurs. Judge Howard Gates stands frozen, his hands now bound in steel, his face drained of color. This is a violation of judicial process, he barks, but the desperation in his voice betrays him. Reporters shove forward, cameras flashing, pens scratching against notepads. The female juror in the front row leans toward her neighbor, whispering, I knew something wasn't right about him. Gates looks around, searching for support, but finds none. His defense attorney sits motionless, head lowered, avoiding his gaze. The officers tighten their grip on his arms. You don't understand, he stammers. This is all a mistake. Pam Bondi doesn't flinch. She nods once. Escort him out. The officers start moving. Gates resists for a brief second, his feet planted, his chest rising in defiance. But he knows it's over. His steps are heavy, each one dragging against the wooden floor as they lead him down the aisle. At the defense table, Charles Lawson watches, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. His confidence has vanished. Suddenly, he bolts upright. I'll talk, he blurts out. His voice cracks. I'll cooperate. I'll tell everything. All eyes shift to him. Karoline slowly turns, her expression calm but firm. Too late, she says, her voice cool. You had your chance. Lawson swallows hard, sinking back into his chair, his fingers trembling against the table. Gates reaches the door, his breathing ragged. He turns his head slightly, his eyes darting toward Karoline. A flicker of something. Anger, regret, fear. Then the doors swing shut behind him. His career, his power, his entire legacy gone. Outside the courthouse, the air is electric. Reporters rush to file their stories, their voices blending into a chaotic hum. Cameras flash as headlines flood the internet. Hashtag Leavitt Bondi trends within minutes. Social media erupts. Judge Gates led away in cuffs. Justice served in real time. The public reaction is instant, relentless. Inside, Karoline gathers her documents, her movements measured. She knew this would be big, but seeing it unfold is something else. Pam Bondi waits by the exit, arms crossed, watching the reporters scramble. As Karoline steps out, Bondi gives her a nod. You just took down one of the most protected men in the system, Bondi says. Karoline exhales, the weight of the moment settling in. He was just the start, she replies. Bondi's gaze sharpens. Lawson named others. Bigger names. We're digging deeper. Karoline nods. Then we keep going. They step into the night, the fight far from over. Karoline steps into her home, the weight of the day pressing down on her. The world outside is still buzzing with the fallout. But here, in the quiet, she can finally breathe. Her mother looks up from the couch, her expression warm but knowing. You did good today, she says softly. Karoline nods, kicking off her heels. Her gaze shifts to the small bundle of energy in the living room. Her son, giggling as he plays. She kneels beside him, scooping him into her arms, feeling his warmth against her chest. She presses a kiss to his forehead. "I do it all for you," she whispers. Her phone buzzes in her pocket. A message flashes on the screen. "Bondi, Mitchell's list is long. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Be ready." Karoline exhales, glancing out the window. Washington's skyline stretches before her, glowing under the night sky. She straightens. "We're just getting started."